This is New Day Northwest. Now, here's Margaret Larson.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to New Day. We start today with a writer, performer, and activist from Seattle whose voice is essential on topics ranging from pop culture to social justice to body image. Her career is spanned from early days at the Stranger newspaper to the publishing of her memoir to now a contributing columnist at the New York Times. She is currently working on the follow-up to that 2016 best-selling memoir, Shrill. If you haven't read it, go get it. Please welcome author Lindy West. Hi there. Hi, how are you?
Fantastic.
And we matched today.
I know.
I love it. Have a seat.
We kind of clash. I'm sorry.
No, I
fault.
think we look very, very pop of color for
good.
spring.
All right.
On trend, as Susie Wiley would say, wherever she is. Tell me a little bit about how you got started as a writer and how you honed in on what you wanted to write about.
Absolutely. It was a really long, slow process. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, I'm going to be a writer. And like, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to college and kind of the only thing I was really into was sitting alone and reading, I guess.
Which is great preparation, it turns out.
I know, absolutely. So, turns out you can get a degree in reading. And I was like, what? So I got an English degree and then I graduated and I was like, now what do I do? And I moved back to Seattle, which is my hometown, and I went back to my summer job, which was at City People's Mercantile in Sandpoint. And while I was there, I was like, I feel like I should use my degree, which is not super useful for cashiering, but maybe I could use it for something else. And so the Stranger had a little tiny ad that said they were looking for a theater intern. And I was like, don't know anything about theater.
But I can do that.
But I can intern. So I did this internship at the Stranger and just kind of stuck around. And I freelanced there for about 7 years. And
wow.
Well, I think I freelanced for 4 and then I was hired on staff for 3 and kind of learned how to write on the fly, which I don't recommend. I don't know that I recommend.
I don't know, the results have been pretty good.
Well, thank you. It's just embarrassing because then all of the steps of your learning process are available on the internet for anyone to Google. But it was a really incredible crash course in how to be a writer. And then I just started to get more and more mainstream sort of national freelance offers. And I moved to Jezebel, which was my first national platform. And it just kind of kept going from there. And I didn't figure out, it wasn't until I got to Jezebel, I think, that I figured out how much power there is in just being honest and being direct and being vulnerable. It's really powerful to be vulnerable. It helps other people who feel like they don't know how to express themselves or they're afraid. And it also, I don't know, it takes away other people's power to hurt you. And so I just started being more and more vulnerable in my work and being more and more uncompromising. And I let go. The most important thing I did, I think, was to let go of this pressure that I always felt to be cool. you want to be cool and edgy and over it and whatever, I don't care. I don't mind being mean. And I was really mean in my early career. And gradually I learned that it's more powerful and it makes your work better to be compassionate and to not maybe be so cool all the time.
And be your whole self, whatever that is. And the feeling I get almost physically when I read your writing is that the space is getting bigger for me to live in, that you are staking out a wider bit of territory for women, for people to live in. And I think that's incredibly important, and I've learned a lot. I also will say that I have been incredibly concerned about you at times. When you were on Twitter, you're not anymore, which I think was a dynamite decision, by the way, because there are just almost no ways to have a good faith argument or back and forth on Twitter. I like to see what Reuters News is putting out and that kind of stuff, but I just otherwise engaging. You were kind of ground zero for this weird response that we now see, especially for female voices, but for others, where it's not enough for somebody to take you up on the substantive part of your argument or to disagree, but just to try to freaking destroy you. You rather famously engaged one of these people. I mean, and believe me, her trolls were on steroids and then on steroids again. They were just cubed, squared, you know, everywhere. You engaged famously one of them, and I wonder if you'd share that with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So long ago now, it's funny how much the world has evolved and how
but
accustomed.
It was epic. It was epic.
Yeah, it's just we're so used to this behavior now, but at the time this was incredibly shocking, to me at least. So I was still
to me too.
Oh, good.
On your behalf.
I was still a Jezebel, and I was writing a lot about, you know, I mean, once you become a outspoken, visible public feminist, people just come after you relentlessly. And I was writing a lot about feminism. I was writing about being fat. I was writing about, you know, maybe it's okay to be fat and you can
still
have
be
a good
a human.
life and still be a human being, which really riles people up. You would be surprised how angry people get by that idea. And one guy made a Twitter account pretending to be my father, who had died less than 2 years earlier, like a year and a half earlier. And he got my dad's picture, and he made this Twitter account, and he had my dad's name, and he was like, I don't remember, he was just calling me fat and saying he was disappointed in me and whatever. And I just couldn't believe that. You know, I just had never imagined that a human being could be that broken, that they would think that that was an okay line to cross. Like it's funny, before that, I was being horribly harassed all the time and threatened and degraded, but there was still, like, that was a line that I was shocked someone crossed. And I wrote about it at Jezebel, and the guy who did it emailed me, and he was like, I'm sorry. He was like, I read what you wrote. That was me. And
which is incredibly unusual, by the way.
Incredibly unusual. I mean, it's never happened to me again. You know, it happened that one time, and
despite rape threats, murder threats, blah blah blah.
Right.
This one dude
just
said,
happened to be the worst one. Yeah, he emailed me, and he said, you know, he didn't know why he did it, but he said he thought that it stemmed from how unhappy he was with himself, and that was just incredible to me. You know, I had never had anyone apologize before.
Or since, probably.
Or since. And so I reached out to the guy, and I interviewed him. I talked to him for about 3 hours on the phone for This American Life. And, you know, it was just exactly what you would imagine. He was lonely, and he had no direction, and he hated his job, and he got dumped, and he hated his body, and he was miserable. And he also felt like I didn't present myself the way that women are supposed to present themselves. He said, you know, I'm very opinionated, and he found that threatening or upsetting in some...
Or needing some control placed
exactly.
on.
I needed to be put in my
Corralled,
place.
exactly. Yeah. This is, by the way, something I'll link on my Facebook page today because it's so worth listening to. So now I'm not only shocked that this dude crossed the line, I'm shocked that there are thousands and millions of people crossing this line. Do we? I don't. Maybe you know. What is your insight into that? What's happening? Because I feel like we're in this kind of powerful step forward Me Too movement, and then in this amazing retrograde reaction all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, look at these people harassing the kids in Florida, the Stoneman Douglas kids.
I'm
it's
lost.
Just
you know, disagree if you want to, but they're kids who've just been through a massacre. Can you please?
It's really, it really shakes your faith in humanity. I don't know exactly how to diagnose it. You know, I'm a writer. I'm not a, you know, I'm not even like a tech professional. I don't know exactly how we got here, but I do know that I think anonymity makes people really bold, and it really lets people indulge their sort of worst impulses. And that's not to say we should get rid of anonymity, because anonymity also has a lot of power for positive good.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
It's tough. But I think we also have people in power who don't just enable and encourage this kind of behavior, but participate in it. Not to get too political on your nice daytime show, but you know, I think that, well, also, this behavior is not new. The internet is just a tool that lets people communicate, that facilitates communication.
Right.
If you go look at, you know, museum exhibits of anti-suffragette propaganda, it's the same stuff that people are sending me on Twitter. It's, you know, fat, ugly, lonely women. We should lock their jaws shut and let them die. You know what I mean? It's the same.
Other than that, though, it's super friendly and supportive, and so that's good. So Lindy has written this book, Shrill, which I told her backstage just spoke to me the minute I saw the title, because growing up in television, of course, you get a lot of feedback on what you look like, what you sound like, and shrill is, you know, was, for my generation, maybe the worst thing somebody could call you, right?
Yeah.
So reclaiming that word and reclaiming our voice and our space is incredibly important, and now you're writing the follow-up to that. Because I always wonder, when people write a memoir, I'm like, she's so young, she's gonna have more life. And so you're writing more now. What do you find yourself concentrating on at this point?
Yeah, well, Shrill, there's a lot of feelings.
You gotta read that. It's got all the feelings.
Packed with feelings.
I reread part of it last night and I laughed all over again, but it's funny. I mean, it's not all just, I'm mad about this happening. You're hilarious.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I mean, that was the idea. Like, I was like, I think if I can make this book really funny, I can trick people into reading all the hard parts.
Excellent.
Which is kind of how I managed my whole career. But for my next book, I was like, I got to take a break from feelings. And
So many feelings.
am so tired of having feelings. And so I...
That's just so fun.
It's exhausting.
It
I have feelings all the time. Oh my
I'm
God.
with you, sister. I'm tired too.
Oh, and I had to go. It's a hard time in history to have feelings, by the way.
is.
And I had to go on a book tour for like 2 years and just go to every city in America and then absorb other people's feelings, which was great, but it was very overwhelming. It was like I would go to these events and people would come, and at first I would read something really vulnerable in front of a bunch of strangers. Then all the strangers would stand in line and come up to me one by one, and then they would tell me their story, and they would cry, and I would cry, and it was like,
Lord.
so next book, no feelings. No. So
When do we expect it out?
I think it'll be early 2019. What year is it? 2018.
It's
yeah,
2018.
so early next
I was
year.
thinking that was a long time away, but it is 2018. I commonly think it's 2017, so don't
shockingly
ask
soon.
me.
Yeah, if you have a book deadline, it's very, very soon.
Do we have title?
No title yet, but it's going to be a sort of return to the stuff I did at The Stranger and at Jezebel, where it'll be
Awesome.
funny essays about pop culture and politics and what is going on with us.
What? Yes. That is my question every day. What is going on? Lindy is a gem, and I hope you never leave Seattle, and I'm a big fan, and you can read her in the New York Times, which is something not everybody gets to say about their writing. Lindy will be leading a multimedia talk called The Witches Are Coming on April 15th. They are super shrill at 7:30 p.m. at Benaroya Hall. We'll link you to tickets on New Day's website. Thank you once again.
Thank you so
Just
much.
Dynamite to have you here. After the break, the wheel is set for a brand new round of New Day Hot Topics. I think Lindy's going to stay with us. Back after this.